Hello and welcome to the English Podcast Lab. I'm Mike, and today we're diving deep into something truly fascinating, the art of mindful conversation. We're lucky to have Sarah, our mindfulness expert, joining us today.
Thanks for having me. I'm thrilled to be here.
You know, mindfulness has become such a buzzword lately, and I think a lot of people are curious about how to apply it to their everyday lives. So today, we're going beyond the hype to explore how to bring more awareness and intention to your conversations. Consider this your masterclass in becoming a conversational ninja. What do you say, Sarah? Ready to unlock the secrets of mindful communication?
Absolutely. And I think a great place to start is with the power of presence. It's truly the foundation of meaningful connection.
Okay, I'm all ears. I know showing up physically is important, but what does it really mean to be truly present in a conversation? What's the difference between just hearing words and deeply listening to someone?
That's a fantastic question. And it gets to the very essence of mindful communication. Presence goes beyond simply being in the same room. It's about being fully engaged with your mind, body, and spirit. It's about bringing your whole self to the interaction.
So it's about more than just lending an ear. It's about bringing your full attention and intention to the conversation. But how do we actually do that? It seems easy in theory, but much harder in practice, especially when we're juggling a million things in our minds.
You're absolutely right. It's not always easy. But think of it this way. The root of the word conversation, con, literally means with. So often, we're talking at people, not with them. Presence is that shift from talking at to being with.
Wow, that's powerful.
Right.
And I think we've all experienced the difference. Remember those times you felt like someone was totally checked out? Even if they were nodding and making eye contact, it just feels empty, doesn't it? Like talking to a wall.
Exactly. It leaves you feeling unseen and unheard. Now contrast that with a conversation where you felt truly listened to, where the other person was hanging on your every word. It's energizing, isn't it? You walk away feeling validated and connected.
It makes a world of difference. So being present is like laying the groundwork for a deeper connection. But what happens next? How do we build on that foundation to create truly meaningful conversations?
Well, once you've cultivated that presence, the next step is to set an intention. Just as you set an intention before a meditation practice, you can set an intention for your conversations. Before you engage, ask yourself, what is my goal here? Am I seeking to understand, to connect, to offer support, or simply to get my point across? That intention becomes your compass, guiding the flow of the interaction.
So it's about approaching the conversation with a clear purpose, rather than just reacting to whatever comes up. It's like having a roadmap to keep us on track. But wouldn't that make the conversation feel too structured or forced?
I'm all for being mindful, but I also want things to feel natural and spontaneous. I understand your concern. And you're right, you don't want to go into a conversation with a rigid script. It's more about having a guiding principle, a North Star that helps you stay aligned with your values and goals for the interaction.
Okay, that makes more sense. So instead of approaching a conversation like a robot, we're setting an intention that helps us navigate the conversation with more clarity and purpose. It's like having a filter that guides our words and actions. But Sarah, what about those times when conversations get heated? It's easy to talk about being present and intentional when everything's calm and pleasant. But what about when emotions run high? How can we stay mindful in the face of conflict or disagreement?
You've hit on a crucial aspect of mindful communication. It's in those challenging moments that mindfulness becomes most critical. And it's precisely when we're most likely to abandon it. Our heart rate goes up, our thoughts race, and we react impulsively, often saying things we later regret.
Oh, tell me about it. I know I've certainly been there. It's like my brain goes completely offline, and I just react from a place of pure emotion, not my proudest moments. But how do we break free from that reactive cycle? How do we stay grounded and centered when the heat is on?
That's where the power of the breath comes in. It's our anchor, our lifeline in those turbulent moments. When you feel yourself getting swept up in emotion, take a few conscious breaths. It sounds so simple, but it can be incredibly powerful.
I get that taking a deep breath can be calming, but how does that help us in the middle of a heated argument? It seems like taking a pause might just make things more awkward or tense.
Think of it less as a pause and more as a reset. Taking a few deep breaths isn't about shutting down the conversation. It's about giving yourself a moment to reconnect with your body and regulate your nervous system. By slowing down your breath, you're signaling to your body and mind that you're safe, which creates space for a more thoughtful and composed response.
So it's about shifting from a reactive state to a more responsive one. I like that. Instead of just firing back with whatever comes to mind, we're taking a moment to collect ourselves and choose our words more carefully. But isn't that kind of manipulative? Like we're just trying to control the conversation.
It's not about manipulation. It's about self-regulation. It's about taking responsibility for our own emotional state so that we can show up as our best selves in the conversation. It's about choosing to respond with intention and clarity, rather than react from a place of stress or overwhelm.
That's a great distinction. It's not about controlling the other person. It's about managing our own internal state so we can be more present and engaged in the conversation. It's about choosing to respond with intention and clarity, rather than react from a place of stress or overwhelm. And I imagine that can be particularly helpful in those situations where we're dealing with someone who's very reactive or emotionally charged.
Absolutely. And you can even invite the other person to breathe with you. So just taking a moment to pause and gather your thoughts together.
So it's like a shared reset. I love that. It takes the pressure off and creates a sense of collaboration. Even in the midst of disagreement, it's almost like saying, hey, we're in this together. Let's take a moment to find our balance before we move forward. But Sarah, even with the best intentions and deep breaths, sometimes those heated conversations stem from a fundamental misunderstanding of each other's needs. How do we bring mindfulness into understanding those deeper needs, especially when it feels like we're speaking different languages?
That's such an important point, and it's where mindful communication goes beyond just techniques and becomes a true art form. Imagine a couple arguing about finances, for example. On the surface, it's about who spent what, or whose fault it is that the bills aren't paid. But if you dig deeper, you often find that those surface-level arguments are masking deeper unmet needs. Maybe one person feels insecure about the financial stability, while the other craves freedom and independence.
So instead of getting stuck in the weeds of who did what, we're taking a step back to understand the underlying emotions and needs that are driving the conflict. It's like we're shifting from blaming and accusing to understanding and empathizing.
That's it, exactly. And it's not always easy to do in the heat of the moment, but it's where the real magic of mindful communication happens.
So we've talked about the importance of presence, setting intentions, using the breath as an anchor, and understanding the needs beneath the surface. What other mindfulness tools can we use to navigate those tricky conversations? I feel like we're just scratching the surface here.
You're absolutely right. There's so much more to explore. And this next tool is one that I've found particularly transformative in my own life. The art of generous interpretation. It's a game changer.
Yeah, I'm intrigued. Tell me more about this generous interpretation thing. What does it mean to interpret something generously?
It's about choosing to see the best in the other person, even when it's tough. Now, it's not about ignoring red flags or pretending everything is okay when it's not. It's about shifting from a place of judgment to a place of curiosity instead of assuming the worst. We ask ourselves, what might be motivating the other person's behavior? What might they be going through that I'm not aware of?
So it's like giving people the benefit of the doubt and trying to see the situation from their perspective, even if their behavior seems hurtful or confusing. But isn't that a bit naive? I mean, sometimes people are just plain wrong, or they're intentionally trying to hurt us. How can we be generous in those situations?
You're right. It's not about being naive or condoning hurtful behavior. It's about recognizing that we all make mistakes, that we all have our own baggage and our own ways of coping with life's challenges. And sometimes, the people who hurt us the most are the ones who are hurting themselves.
That's a really powerful insight. I can see how shifting our perspective in this way can create more space for empathy and understanding, even in difficult situations.
And that's where mindfulness comes in. Next time you're feeling triggered in a conversation, pause and ask yourself, what's a more generous way to interpret this situation?
So it's like consciously choosing to see the situation through a more compassionate lens, even if it feels challenging. It's about assuming good intentions, even when it's hard. But Sarah, that seems like a tall order, especially when emotions are running high. How do we cultivate that kind of generous spirit when we're feeling hurt or angry?
It definitely takes practice. And it's not always easy. But the more we practice this kind of mindful interpretation, the easier it becomes. It's about rewiring our brains to see the best in others, even when it's difficult.
Okay, This is fascinating stuff. But I have a confession to make. I consider myself a pretty mindful person. But sometimes, even when I'm trying to be present and intentional, my mind just wanders. I find myself getting distracted by my to-do list, or what I'm going to eat for dinner, or that embarrassing thing I said 10 years ago. It's like my mind has a mind of its own. How do we stay focused and present when our minds are so prone to distraction?
Don't worry, you're not alone. Our minds are wired to wander. It's a natural part of being human. But just like in meditation, when you notice your mind has wandered, gently guide your attention back to the conversation. It's a practice, not a performance.
So it's not about berating ourselves for getting distracted, but rather gently redirecting our attention back to the present moment. It's about recognizing those distractions without judgment and then choosing to refocus.
Exactly. It's about cultivating a sense of gentle awareness, both of our internal state and of the dynamics of the conversation.
Okay, this is all starting to make sense. We're learning to be more present, intentional, use our breath as an anchor, understand the needs beneath the surface, practice generous interpretation, and cultivate a gentle awareness of our wandering minds. But Sarah, is there anything else we need to know about having mindful conversations? I feel like there's still so much to learn.
There's always more to learn, and that's what makes this journey of mindful communication so exciting. But before we move on, I think it's important to talk about the role of curiosity.
Oh, curiosity. I love that. I've always considered myself a curious person. But how does that relate specifically to conversations? I'm all ears.
Curiosity is the antidote to assumptions. Think about it. So often we go into conversations with preconceived notions about what the other person is thinking or feeling, and those assumptions can create so much disconnect.
It's like we're already writing the script before the conversation even begins. And that closes us off to truly hearing what the other person has to say. I know I've been guilty of that myself.
But we all have. It's human nature. But curiosity helps us to step outside of our own limited perspective and approach conversations with a beginner's mind, open and eager to learn. It's about approaching the other person as a mystery to be explored, rather than a problem to be solved.
I love that. It takes the pressure off and allows us to simply be present with what is, without trying to force things into a neat little box. But how do we actually practice curiosity in conversations? What does that look like in action?
Well, one of the most powerful ways to cultivate curiosity is through the art of asking open-ended questions, instead of asking yes or no questions, which tend to shut down the conversation. Ask questions that invite the other person to share their thoughts and feelings more fully.
So things like, tell me more about that.
Yeah.
Or, what's important to you in this situation?
Yes, you're inviting them to elaborate, to share their unique perspective. And that can make all the difference in creating a sense of understanding and connection.
It's like we're turning the conversation into a shared exploration rather than a battle of wills. And it makes the whole experience so much richer and more engaging. But Sarah, I have to admit, sometimes even when I'm trying to be curious, I find myself interrupting or finishing people's sentences. I guess it's part of being human. But how do we overcome that tendency and truly listen with the intention of learning something new?
Yes. The art of listening. It's one of the most undervalued skills in communication, yet it's absolutely essential for creating connection. And you're right, it's something that takes practice. We're often so caught up in our own thoughts and agendas that we forget to truly listen to what the other person is saying.
So it's not just about being polite and waiting our turn to speak. It's about actively engaging with the other person's words and trying to understand their perspective. But how do we do that when our minds are racing a million miles a minute? How do we quiet that internal chatter and really tune in to what the other person is saying?
That's where mindfulness comes in again. It's about bringing that same gentle awareness to our listening that we bring to our speaking. Notice when your mind starts to wander, when you're formulating your response before the other person has even finished speaking. And when that happens, gently guide your attention back to their words, to the nuances of their voice, to their body language.
So it's almost like a meditation practice, but instead of focusing on our breath, we're focusing on the other person's words and presence. And that creates space for deeper understanding and connection. It's like we're saying, I see you, I hear you, I'm here with you.
Beautifully said. It's about creating a space of presence and receptivity where the other person feels truly seen and heard. And when that happens, something magical unfolds. The walls come down, the defenses melt away, and we open ourselves up to the possibility of genuine connection.
This is incredible stuff, Sarah. I'm starting to see how all these mindfulness tools, presence, intention, the breath, generous interpretation, curiosity, and deep listening all work together to create a more authentic and fulfilling communication experience. It's not just about avoiding conflict or getting our way, it's about creating a space for true connection, even in the midst of disagreement or challenge. But you know what? All this talk about mindfulness is making me feel a bit tense. It's like there's this pressure to do it perfectly, to be constantly mindful in every interaction. And that feels exhausting.
You know, I think that's a really common misconception about mindfulness. It's not about striving for perfection or becoming some kind of Zen master. It's simply about bringing a gentle awareness to our present moment experience, and that includes awareness of our own imperfections. It's okay to get distracted, to lose our focus, to stumble and make mistakes.
It's like we're learning to embrace our humanity, both the light and the shadow, and that's incredibly liberating.
Absolutely. Mindfulness is about accepting ourselves exactly as we are, flaws and all. And that acceptance allows us to be more compassionate and understanding with others, even when they make mistakes.
I love that. So it's not about striving for some unattainable ideal of perfection, but rather about embracing the messy, beautiful reality of being human. But Sarah, even with that awareness, I think it can be challenging to stay present and focused in conversations, especially when we're feeling stressed or overwhelmed. What are some practical tips for staying grounded and centered in those moments when our minds are racing and our emotions are running high?
Well, one of the most powerful tools for grounding and centering is the body. We often forget that we're not just minds floating in space. We have these amazing physical bodies that can be incredible anchors in times of stress.
That's interesting. So how do we use our bodies to support our mindful communication? It sounds a bit counterintuitive.
It might sound strange at first, but one of the simplest and most effective techniques is to pay attention to your posture. When you're feeling stressed or anxious, notice what happens to your body. Do you hunch over? Clench your jaw? Hold your breath?
I know I do. I tend to tense up my shoulders and clench my fists. It's like my body is mirroring my internal state of stress.
Exactly. And the fascinating thing is that it works both ways. By consciously shifting your posture, you can actually influence your internal state. It's like sending a signal to your nervous system that you're safe and in control.
So by simply adjusting our posture, we can actually calm our nerves and create a more positive and receptive mindset for conversation.
That's the idea. Try it right now. Sit up straight, lengthen your spine, relax your shoulders, and feel your feet grounded on the floor. Notice how that simple shift in posture affects your breathing, your energy levels, and even your mood.
Wow, I can feel a difference already. It's like I'm more present and alert, but also more relaxed and at ease. It's like my whole body is saying, okay, we got this. We can handle whatever comes our way.
It's a simple yet powerful technique that you can practice anytime, anywhere, while waiting in line, sitting at your desk, even during a heated conversation. It's like having a secret weapon for staying grounded and centered, no matter what the situation.
I love that. It's like we're creating a physical foundation for mindful communication. But Sarah, what about those times when even adjusting our posture doesn't seem to calm those racing thoughts and churning emotions? Are there any other tools we can use to find that sense of inner peace and clarity?
Absolutely. And this next one is a favorite of mine. It's called grounded curiosity breathing.
Okay, that sounds intriguing. What exactly is grounded curiosity breathing, and how is it different from regular deep breathing?
It's a breathing technique that combines the calming power of the breath with the expansive energy of curiosity. It's about using your breath to anchor yourself in the present moment while simultaneously opening your mind to new possibilities.
I am definitely intrigued. How does it work?
It's quite simple. As you inhale, imagine breathing in a sense of curiosity, a willingness to see things from a fresh perspective, to be open to what the other person has to say. And as you exhale, feel yourself grounding, connecting to a sense of stability and presence, rooting yourself in the earth.
So it's like we're using our breath to cultivate both openness and stability at the same time.
That's it. It's about finding that balance between being receptive and grounded.
And how do we apply this breathing technique to actual conversations? It seems like it would be hard to focus on our breath while also trying to engage in a meaningful conversation.
It can be incredibly helpful in navigating those moments when you feel your emotions starting to rise. When you notice that tension creeping into your body or that judgmental voice starting to chatter in your mind, when you notice yourself getting tense or reactive, take a few conscious breaths, focusing on inhaling curiosity and exhaling grounding.
So it's like hitting the reset button before things escalate.
Yes. It gives you a chance to pause, regulate your nervous system, and respond from a more centered and intentional place. It allows you to create space between the stimulus and your response, which is where the magic of mindfulness happens.
I love that. It's like having a built-in stress management tool that we can access anytime, anywhere.
Precisely. And it's not just about managing stress. Grounded curiosity breathing can also help you stay more engaged and present in the conversation.
How so? I'm curious.
Well, when you're breathing consciously and cultivating curiosity, you're less likely to get caught up in your own thoughts and more likely to be attuned to what the other person is saying. It's like you're creating more space in your mind to truly listen and receive their words.
That makes perfect sense. It's like we're creating space for a more genuine and connected interaction. It's like we're saying, I'm here with you, fully present, and I'm open to whatever you have to share.
Exactly. And that's really the heart of mindful communication, creating those moments of genuine connection, even in the midst of disagreement or challenge. It's about recognizing our shared humanity and approaching each other with kindness and understanding, even when things get tough.
This has been so insightful, Sarah. I'm learning so much.
Yeah.
But before we move on, I want to revisit something we talked about earlier, the art of generous interpretation. It's such a powerful concept, and I think it deserves a little more attention. So remind me again, what exactly is generous interpretation, and how do we practice it in our everyday conversations?
It's like giving people the benefit of the doubt, assuming good intentions, even when their words or actions might rub us the wrong way.
I get it. But it sounds like it takes a lot of conscious effort.
It does. It's not always easy, especially when we're feeling hurt or triggered. But remember, generous interpretation isn't about being naive or letting people walk all over us. It's about choosing to see the situation through a lens of compassion and understanding.
So instead of jumping to conclusions or making assumptions, we're pausing to consider alternative explanations for the other person's behavior. We're asking ourselves, what else could be going on here? What might I be missing?
Precisely. And that pause, that moment of reflection, is where the magic happens. It allows us to step out of our own limited perspective and see the situation from a wider angle. It allows us to access our empathy and compassion, even when it's challenging.
I can see how that shift in perspective can be incredibly powerful. It's like we're taking off those judgmental glasses and putting on a pair of compassion lenses. But Sarah, it sounds like all of this mindful communication stuff takes a lot of practice. What advice would you give to someone who's just starting out on this journey? Where do we begin?
That's a great question. And you're right, mindful communication is a practice. Just like meditation or yoga, it's something we cultivate over time with patience and compassion for ourselves. But one of the best pieces of advice I can give is to start small. Choose one of the techniques we've discussed today, whether it's paying attention to your posture, practicing grounded curiosity breathing, or cultivating generous interpretation. And commit to practicing it for a week, just 1 week.
So it's not about trying to overhaul our entire communication style overnight, but rather choosing one specific area to focus on and making small, incremental changes.
Exactly. It's about building those mindful muscles, one step at a time. And as you practice, notice how it impacts your conversations, your relationships, and your overall well-being. Pay attention to those subtle shifts in your energy, your mood, and your sense of connection with others.
That's great advice.
It's about taking those small steps, those consistent actions that ultimately lead to lasting transformation. It's like that saying, the journey of 1,000 miles begins with a single step.
But Sarah, for those who are really eager to dive deeper into this world of mindful communication, what resources would you recommend? Are there any books, courses, or websites that you found particularly helpful?
Oh, absolutely. There's a wealth of amazing resources out there for anyone who wants to deepen their understanding and practice of mindful communication. One of my all-time favorite books is Nonviolent Communication by Marshall Rosenberg. It's a classic for a reason. It offers a powerful framework for understanding the needs behind our communication and finding ways to connect with empathy and compassion.
I've heard great things about that book. It's definitely on my reading list.
And for those who prefer a more hands-on approach, there are mindfulness-based communication workshops and courses available online and in many communities. These programs offer guided practices and opportunities to connect with others who are exploring the path of mindful communication. It can be incredibly supportive and inspiring to practice these skills with a group of like-minded individuals.
That's wonderful. It's great to know that there's a whole community of people out there who are passionate about bringing more awareness and compassion to their communication. It's like we're all in this together, supporting each other on this journey of growth and connection.
Absolutely. And remember, the journey of mindful communication is an ongoing exploration. It's not about reaching some final destination, but rather about embracing the process of learning, growing, and deepening our connection with ourselves and others.
Beautifully said. It's like we're all works in progress, constantly evolving and expanding our capacity for love, compassion, and understanding. And that's a beautiful thing. Well, Sarah, this has been an absolutely incredible conversation. I feel like I've gained so much valuable knowledge about the art of mindful communication, and I'm sure our listeners have too. Do you have any final words of wisdom for our audience before we wrap up? What's the one thing you want them to take away from this deep dive?
Remember that the power of mindful communication is within each of us. It's not something we have to search for or acquire. It's already there, waiting to be cultivated and expressed. By choosing to be present, intentional, and compassionate in our interactions, we can create a more harmonious and fulfilling world for ourselves and everyone around us.
What a beautiful and inspiring message. Thank you so much for sharing your wisdom and passion with us today. I'm so grateful for your time and insights.
It's been my absolute pleasure. I've loved our conversation, and I'm excited to see how your listeners bring these practices to life in their own unique ways.
And to our amazing listeners, thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the world of mindful communication. We hope you found this episode insightful and inspiring. If you enjoyed it, we encourage you to hit that like button, share it with a friend who could use a communication upgrade, and subscribe to our channel for more mind-expanding episodes. Until next time, keep those conversations mindful and remember, the power to connect is always within you.